Good evening, everyone. We are here for the Redevelopment Agency meeting. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Our first order of business is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak. Is there anyone wishing to speak in public comment? Ms. DeShane?
Judy DeShane. I did let you guys know what some of my thoughts were on this, but just to bring it up so other people are aware, I took issue with some of the things that were showing as eligible because from my research, those things are more furniture and fixtures or internal types of things that are required by law and are probably already there. So I wanted to let you know I did do some research on my facts when I sent you those. The other thing is I noticed a mistake on the new plan on page under where they have the corrected RDA plan. On page 2 up at the top, the third sentence, it says 5 years and that was changed to 10. So just want to make sure that that gets addressed and maybe corrected before a vote actually comes. But feel free to make it 15 or 20 years as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment for the Redevelopment Agency meeting? Mr. Fan?
My name is Glenn Fan. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I have to go along with Judy's research. A lot of the things on that RDA request. RDA is great for, I thought it was more for preserving the history, keep the building fronts looking like, make them nice to look. But, I'm sorry, a grease trap is a fixture. Does that mean down the road a ways Vinny's is going to need a new pizza oven so we can give them RDA money for a new pizza oven? I mean, it's the same type of thing. It's a piece of equipment, that you have to operate. It's no different than having to have a dishwasher, no different than having to have a grill. I'm not seeing where the RDA money should be spent on buying equipment that is necessary to conduct business. Just a couple thoughts. So think hard before you make a final decision, or maybe get some changes in or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? Again, this is for the Redevelopment Agency meeting. All right, we will go ahead and close public comment. First item of business is approval of the minutes from our October 8th, 2019 meeting. Any discussion or changes on the minutes? Motion for approval?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Item number 2, resolution number 219, a resolution of the Redevelopment Agency of Boulder City accepting written disclosures for the RDA board members of property they own or have a direct or indirect financial interest that lie within the RDA boundaries. Madam City Clerk, did you have any?
Oh, sorry.
We know it works.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just a standard. It's required by NRS that members of the board and officers of the board submit a disclosure that is entered into the minutes if they have any property within the RDA. And so Member Hoskins filled out her RDA right when she was appointed. And since this was the first opportunity to enter it into the minutes, it's included for approval with the resolution. And also, any changes to that status, it is incumbent upon you to report that so we can enter that into the minutes as well.
Thank you. All right. No action required on that, or do we need to? Well, we need to adopt the resolution, correct? Okay. Do we have a motion for approval of the resolution?
I'll move to approve resolution number 220. Resolution number 219.
Thank you.
I looked at the wrong one.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously.
What time?
Item number 3, for possible action, resolution number 220, a resolution of the Redevelopment Agency of Boulder City authorizing RDA grant program funding for certain eligible improvement costs related to the property located at 1129 Arizona. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, RDA Chairman and board members. Rafi Fastikshan, Economic Development Coordinator for Boulder City. Evans Town Grill, which is located at 1129 Arizona Street, has recently been sold to Very, Very Serious Business LLC, members Brett Runyon and Grant Turner. The managing partners are proposing to spend $98,385 for renovation activities and plan on leasing the unit to a restaurant operator. Some of the proposed eligible RDA improvements include exterior stucco and paint, replacement of the storefront frames and glass, and some electrical work, just to kind of name a few. Very, Very Serious Business LLC would be eligible for up to 30% reimbursement of funds through the city's RDA commercial grant program. Based on eligible expenses, they could receive up to $29,516 in total reimbursements. The RDA grant budget is $180,000 for this fiscal year. To date, there's been a total of 3 grants that have been approved, totaling $39,619. More than happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Brent is also here from Very, Very Serious Business LLC to answer any specific project-related questions that you may have.
Mr. Mayor, at this time, I'd like to recuse myself as one of the applicants is the employer of my fiancée.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yes, I spoke with you earlier. I'm confused with the $138,570 and the $98,385. And I tried subtracting back and forth with things that weren't included, and I couldn't come up to that difference. So can you?
Okay, yeah, taking a look at using the Newcastle bid, if you exclude the permits, looking at the actual eligibility line items, if you exclude the permits, the roof repairs, the 3 signs, and the mural or sculpture, and include everything else that was in the Newcastle bid, you should come up with the $98,385, which is the lowest bid out of the 3 bids, which is required by NRS.
Okay, and there are 3 bids, but one of them is a family-related individual who bid, and we do allow that, is that correct?
We did look into NRS, and the requirement is 3 bids, so the applicant did provide 3 bids.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I had a couple questions on some of the things that are marked eligible. One of those is the patio speakers, grease separator, misters. I tried to find where that fell under in the eligible projects, and I just couldn't see that. And I did just get new documents about 5 o'clock tonight, so I haven't been able to go through everything, but
yeah, those items have been eligible in the past, but it is up to the board's discretion on approval. But yeah, historically, those have been eligible, and they are exterior-related items which qualify. So all the improvements that are listed here are exterior improvements which do qualify.
okay, so you're saying anything exterior would qualify?
Correct, except roofing.
Okay, and then I have another question. There's an item on here to improve and polish the patio floor, and I'm assuming that's the outdoor area. Do they have a special permit that allows them to use the entire sidewalk as a patio?
They're required under NRS to get all city permits in order to do all their work, whether encroachment licenses or any other permits required.
Okay, so that line item would only be eligible if that permit was acquired?
Correct.
Thank you.
Right.
Question I had along that same vein, there's something in here about planters. You said that Mr. Runyon was here?
Correct.
Mr. Runyon? The question I had about the planters is, I'm assuming those are going to be on the exterior of the building?
Yes, at this time, that's what that plan is.
And is the plan then to put those on the city right-of-way?
Anything that we do at the right-of-way would require a lease with the city, and that would be the plan at this time.
Okay. And, you know, Board Member Folda just brought out that there's some other work, the polishing of that. These are things that are not yet approved by the city. The application has not yet been submitted for approval.
That's correct.
I have a concern about the RDA board tonight approving things that we don't know if they're going to be acceptable based on the applications that are being made.
Well, as Rafi, I'm sure, could verify, the money wouldn't be released until everything was done according to the code.
Right.
Well, my concern is that by us approving it, we're giving some indication that those uses are approved, and I'm concerned about that. I would not want a body, I mean, we are city council, but at this time we're sitting as the board of the RDA to say, yes, we believe these are eligible expenses, only to find out there's some issue that we don't know about at this time that would prevent that work from happening, and then have the applicant come back later and say, well, you already approved this, so you already knew that we were intending to do that. I'm very concerned about giving that impression that this body is saying that those types of expenses are acceptable or eligible within this framework here.
I can understand your concern, but being experienced in this process previously myself, I can assure you that it has happened before, and I assume this is the precedence because there's all these projects take on life of their own while you're in there. But what we're asking for are very specific parts, but of course we'll have to get a lot of different permits as we go along. And Rafi, could you verify this? I'm assuming, since I've been through this before, that it's standard practice because I know that's the way we did it before. Can you test?
In my short experience, there's nothing unusual here.
Well, you know, you mentioned the word precedent, and I guess that's my concern, is whether we're giving the indication of this being a precedent. My concern is, too, especially with these planters, we've had issues before with the use of the city sidewalks by businesses to do various things. Over time, we've come to an agreement about how that might be done. That has been violated by some businesses going well beyond what the agreements had been. When we talk about the businesses that have tables and chairs out on the city sidewalks, those are fairly easily moved. I don't know what these planters are going to look like and how easily moved they would be, how much of an encumbrance they would be on the city sidewalk. So I have a concern about that.
Grant, would you like to speak on that? Could we do them in a fashion they're movable?
As far as my history with the RDA program, reimbursements...
I'm not asking about your history with it. I'm asking specifically about these planters.
Can we move them or put them in a way that's not...
we would be willing to, we are agreeable to the city's preference, and we will work within that framework.
Because again, I know your business, for instance, has gone well beyond what the agreements were at times for the use of the city sidewalks, and that's a concern. We seem to have gotten back to where those agreements were originally, and to have something say, well, you know, we're going to have these planters out there on the sidewalk. You know, it's a concern of mine with the way our city sidewalks have been used at times in the past.
I'm unaware of any compliance issues with any of my businesses in the city, and consistent with how we've operated in the past, we will go to extraordinary measures to be in compliance with the city with 1129 Arizona Street as well. And any eligible any eligible RDA items are subject to approval by all the appropriate, encroachment licenses, building permits, and we plan on being in compliance with all of those.
But regarding the precedents, I think the precedence has already been set.
Well, that's the problem. I don't want to continue something where it appears we're giving approvals for things that turn out that there's some conflict with what our regulations are, what the use of those rights of way are. That's the problem with precedents. If it's wrong, it needs to be stopped at some point. So that's my question about these particular items. I think Board Member Hoskins also brought up something that's important to our decision making, and that is the lowest bid happens to be Mr. Turner's father. Within that bid, there are several $1,000s in overhead and profit that have been calculated on the bid. This board is not obligated to meet the 30% match. That's a cap on what the match is. It's not an automatic from what I understand. So it is possible that we have items on here that board members have already expressed some concerns about. That match could be reduced to 20 or 25% rather than the 30%. And quite honestly, with the way this has been presented, I would certainly be willing to amend this to reduce it to a 25% match rather than the 30%, because there are some items on here that I find might not be appropriate within this particular instance.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Michael Mays, the Assistant Executive Director of the RDA, and as well as the Community Development Director. For the members' edification, one of the requirements for consideration of RDA funds is that the applicant cannot proceed with the work until they receive approval from the RDA as well as the City Council. And hence, one of the reasons that the city ensures that even though the RDA and council may be approving certain eligible items, it's still subject to all of the rules and regulations of the city. They have to acknowledge that in their agreement with the city so that we ensure compliance. And through that compliance, that may result in a reduced dollar amount when the actual invoices are submitted. So each applicant has to acknowledge that fact as part of receipt of RDA funds.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. I don't think that really impacts the concerns that have been expressed regarding the overhead and profit for a construction company that happens to be related to the applicant. But I do appreciate that clarification. It also doesn't mean that these other items are necessarily things that we have to accept if we have concerns about them. You can always submit a second application if that's the case. Any other thoughts from board members?
Yeah, I do. I guess I have to take a different tact on this because I'm looking at lighting, electrical, framing, and I'm assuming during the stages, all stages of this process, there's a permitting process? I mean, in terms of electrical work and so on, am I correct on that?
Yeah, anything that requires a permit will have to adhere to that. That is correct.
Okay, so there are items on here that would be considered eligible that we would be agreeing to that would still be contingent upon meeting code ordinances and being and receiving necessary permits.
That is correct.
Okay, that's where I'm concerned about deciding that certain things may or may not be considered now because they may or may not be permitted in the future, that many of these things would need to be inspected and so on before continuing. Right? Yes?
I was under the impression that we had to get the RDA approved before we started the work, right?
Right.
And some of this work some of the permits you can't get all of them up front. So it's kind of a catch-22 here, that as you go through a project, there's new permits that will be required that we don't even know yet. So once you get there, you can't start a project without the RDA approval.
Right.
Right.
I understand that.
Right.
My point is in agreement that.
Thank you.
That saying that my concern is saying that there are certain items on here that we won't or might not consider approving because they may or may not meet code ordinances or so on. There are a number of things that are not known yet whether they would be
Correct.
permitted. So,
Any items that aren't able to be permitted will not be, we will not perform those activities, and we will not request reimbursement.
okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on my point, though, the planters are one issue I've brought up. I think at least two of us have brought up the issue of payment of overhead and profit to a family member of the applicant. I don't think those have an impact really with the permitting process. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Not yet?
Mr. Runyon?
Grant did agree that if the planters were an issue, we could make those in a fashion they could be moved. So if that is a requirement or a request, then that could be attained. I would like to also quickly add that the RDA for us allows us to do a bigger, more impactful job. And speaking of job, we will be adding jobs in downtown Boulder City with this project, which all of the projects we've ever done have done the same thing. We've taken projects like My Desert Sun Realty. We put 15 jobs in downtown Boulder City where there were maybe 3 before. Grant with the Dillinger, the Forge. These are all projects that the RDA approved that brought new jobs down here after we also increased real estate value and also increased tax values. And that kind of, to me, is the purpose of RDA. This will allow us to do a bigger project over here and ultimately improve downtown Boulder City. That's our goal with everything we ever do, improving this area of town. We have a lot at stake here. We've made major investments here, and I feel like this is just one way that allows us to continue with some of the good work that we've done in the past.
The prior use of this property was as a restaurant?
Yes, it was prior, and right now in its current capacity, they serve 5 meals a week. So whatever we do, we'll certainly be upping the volume for more meals than 5 meals a week.
I'm not sure what you mean. They only serve less than a meal a day?
They're open for 5 dinners per week. That's all that Evans is open for right now. So whatever we do, we'll expand upon that, and that's where you create jobs.
Okay, you're saying that they're open 5 evenings a week?
That is correct.
Okay, I just don't want to substitute trade talk for...
Oh, it's a dinner. If you were open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week, obviously that'd be 21 meals a week. Right now, they're open for 5.
Okay, so what's the anticipated difference in number of employees that are currently there to what is foreseen should this go forward?
They currently have 1 shift. So even if you just expanded into 2 shifts, you would double the number that they have, which would take it from maybe 10 people to 20.
Is that what's anticipated?
That would be a reasonable...
Somewhere in that neighborhood, and...
So hours of operation. Now, I understand, too, this isn't, you're not going to operate this business, right? You're going to lease this location out?
That is correct, but we're going to be very, very selective on who we put in there.
Okay.
We have a lot of applicants already, so we will have room to work and find the right person that meet our requirements and our goals.
So at this time, it's unknown. I mean,
that is
you may
correct.
have an idea of what the people that you've been talking to have in mind, but it's unknown at this time.
That's correct, but we have ultimate control over who we pick to put in there.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well,
Sorry, I do.
Go ahead.
Not so. I appreciate the work that you've done with employment and working, but on this project itself, I feel like I just want to go off of what the RDA board has decided what is eligible and what is not, and I feel like there's a little bit of a gap and some gray area. So I would like to approve the items that are in question that have to do with the building and structure. As far as the exterior, windows are included in that, additions, construction, demolition, painting, new landscaping, those things, those items I'm comfortable with doing. What I'm not comfortable with doing is adding on extra fixtures and things that aren't eligible projects under the RDA grant program.
Rafi, I don't know. Are you able to go back and recalculate the value of this, or?
Are any of the eligible improvements shown not actually eligible?
When staff looked at the ineligible project classes, that was defined in Resolution 63 back in 2006. Under exterior improvements, it specifically says none presently listed. And so that's kind of the mindset that we were. Also, again, the precedents, it's again up to the board's discretion on what line items they would like to approve. We certainly feel, staff certainly feels that the line items set forth abide by the guidelines. But we can definitely go ahead and calculate what you all feel is eligible.
Board Member Folda, any other questions?
Well, no, I appreciate that, but there are specific items that specifically state, for example, building or structures, restoration of exterior facade, construction of new exterior facade, storefronts, exterior windows, building additions, construction of boundary walls, documents and preparation of that, painting of the exterior of the building, historical murals, I'm assuming that's restoring them, landscaping, parking lot improvements, signage, which we have another grant for that, which I think we're holding off the signage for this one for that, and life and safety improvements, which include fire sprinkler systems, fire suppression, electrical system where deemed a public safety hazard by the fire chief and building official, installation of required improvements to comply with FDA or ADA. And so as a board member, I am comfortable with those items that are filled in that. I feel like the exterior, the intent of this was to make a nicer exterior and uplift for the house. But it doesn't give is to go ahead with the Taj Mahal. And this is, RDA money is tax money that's kept into the city to help improve the city. And as a board member, I'd be more comfortable with approving those things that are explicitly agreed upon by the board that had made up this eligibility list. That's where I sit.
I think a possible compromise, because again, I have a very serious concern. I know Board Member Hoskins has also expressed the concern that this work is being done by the father of Mr. Turner with the O&P and all of that. Certainly, contractors regularly add that type of money to the to bids, but in this case, we have a family member and we have tax money involved here. It's not money that's owed to anybody. This is a grant program. It's not a on-demand program. So I have a real concern about that. As a compromise, I think if we do set the match amount at 25%, I think that might satisfy everyone's concerns, but I'll entertain any discussion on that.
Well, I could agree on that.
Any other thoughts?
We could disallow that low bid and go to the next one.
Or we could set it at 25% for the grant amount. Okay, I'll make a motion then that we approve the application for the matching amount at 25%.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that's 3-1 then, approval of Resolution 220. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item of business, item number 4, resolution number 221, a resolution of the Redevelopment Agency creating a new historical preservation grant program. Mr. Mays.
So as part of the council's approval of the fiscal year 20 budget, $100,000 was approved for a new RDA grant. This is for historic preservation efforts. And I want to make it clear that the $100,000 that was approved is in addition to the existing $180,000 that has been approved for the last couple of years for the regular RDA grant. So this is additional money toward RDA grant efforts within the community. The grant guidelines have been developed, have been presented to the Historic Preservation Committee for their review and input, received council input, and went back to the Historic Preservation Committee for further input. So the guidelines that are before you this evening reflect the input of both the council as well as the Historic Preservation Committee. You'll note that 2 of the significant modifications are that up to 50% reimbursement would be allowed for eligible items with this grant program. And then also that the applicant would agree to a maintenance agreement for 10 years. And so staff recommends the adoption of Resolution 220, subject to member Folda's changes that include the RDA and historic district map references in the guidelines, as well as the clarification within the guidelines regarding the 10-year maintenance agreement. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
First, I want to say thank you. This, I know, was a lot of work. I had a lot of changes that you did very well in adding this in, and staff did a great job of making it a lot clearer of what was included in this. I just had a couple of questions about how, once we create this and it's implemented, how does the 10-year work? That wasn't something I really understood, was if, it changes owners, things like that, how is that maintained? There will be some kind of a restriction or deed? How does that work for if there's a change in ownership?
There is an agreement and an acknowledgement that the applicant must sign, which is recorded against the property. This spells out the conditions and terms for the grant reimbursement. It includes clawback provisions so that if over a certain time frame, and in the case of this grant, because we're talking about a 10-year time frame, we would require a certain reimbursement if the applicant is not complying with the conditions of the grant. It also spells out the city's rights to provide compliance by the applicant during that term.
Okay, and so that would stay with the property even if it changed hands? Correct. Okay.
Because it's recorded against the property.
Okay. And then I had one other, okay. So as a property owner and they want to, put the front of their building, back to more historical accuracy of when it was first created, how, is staff able to do that research for them, or how would they go about finding how to restore the building if they wanted to make it how it was originally?
Well, staff would certainly rely on existing archival research, information that may be contained by the State Historic Preservation Office, as well as local museums and reference material to help address that. And as is spelled out within the guidelines, every applicant would have to adhere the Secretary of Interior's standards for renovation and restoration.
So I believe there's a time limit for residential home plans, so it's like 3 years or something, but commercial, are those kept indefinitely, the commercial plans?
We have, part of the challenge is before 1960, the city was run by the federal government. And so with a lot of the properties built at that time, the city received whatever plans the federal government had, and sometimes that was spotty. So there's no guarantee that we would have the original plans. So part of what we would rely on is archival information and photographs.
Okay. And so I know that there was a recent business that underwent working on bringing a building back to how it was originally. So how did that work? Were you involved, and was the city staff involved with that at all?
Yeah, city staff evaluated their proposal. I think you're referring to the Boulder City Company store.
Yes.
And they had hired an architect which did archival research. Excuse me, to look at what the original front porch looked like, and that was their proposal to restore it to that original condition.
Do you know if that was available with plans in Boulder City, or did they have to go to archives? Or I know a lot of the original federal plans are in Colorado, I think, their headquarters. Do you know if that was available here or if they had to go somewhere else?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know the source of those plans.
Okay, thank you. I just want to know in the future when they're trying to, restore things, how they would get that information. Thank you.
Board Member Bridges?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I love the way it's laid out now. I recognize that it was a lot of work and that the words preserve, rehabilitate, and restore had to be written quite a few times in the list, but I appreciate the layout now. And I really don't have any questions. I just wanted to comment on the fact that it's a much better document than it was before. So thank you.
I once again, I'd like to echo thanks for all the work that went into this. One of the things that I had noted previously when we discussed this was the being a little bit more specific about the eligibility in that it being tied to a historic place or within the historic district. With the new one, is it a concern that a business might be interested in restoring its historic thing, but because it was not included in the original Janus report or otherwise, that they might not have access to these historic preservation efforts if they would want to bring it up to restoration, whereas before it was just any building under 50 years, but having to comply that any new construction work would have to follow the guidelines set by the Secretary of Interior. I know before I was looking to be a little bit more exclusive, but I'm thinking as far as historic preservation is concerned, maybe being a little bit more inclusive might be a better tact, but I'm also happy with this. Absolutely, it doesn't mean that we can't make improvements later if that does seem to be something that other businesses are interested in. So I'm happy with how it is, but I just wanted to point that out if anybody else had those same concerns.
Well, I think, this grew out of an effort to promote preservation. Businesses are still eligible for up to the 30% matching funds. This is an incentive for those businesses within the historic district. If they comply with those standards, we will match up to 50% rather than the 30%. So I think that's the compromise kind of that we arrived at. I too appreciate all the work that staff put into developing these guidelines. Our uptown businesses, I believe, thrive because of the image of what the area looks like. And I think this is an effort through the RDA to make sure that that continues on and makes that extra money available. You know, we have talked about, or it has been discussed, not by the RDA, but, you know, there may be other historic districts that might be created in the future, or properties that are designated as historic. They don't have to be within a district. So there are some possibilities that should we come across a situation like that, we could look for some ways to deal with it. Any other questions or comments? Have a motion for approval then of Resolution 221.
I'll move to approve resolution number 221.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Mays. And with that, we are at our final public comment period. Again, this is for the Redevelopment Agency. The final public comment period, you may speak to any issue. Is there anyone wishing to speak in public comment? Mr. Sinayakan?
Neil Sinikin. The purpose of the RDA fund for those improvements is to help encourage redevelopment and historic preservation. I'm just wondering, should there be some consideration where specific improvements serve to increase the value of the property? Should there be some kind of return of those funds upon sale of the property? Some things are required, some things just serve to make the property more valuable. Certain things should be negotiated out of the purchase price when the property is acquired, things that meet code that should be deducted from the selling price. So I just wondered, is there any way or any interest in evaluating at the time of sale of the property, should any of the improvement monies that are given out to the applicants, and I'm not speaking specifically on any one application, should they be looked at for certain portions of the fund to be returned back to the fund on sale? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? All right, we will close public comment then and adjourn the meeting of the Redevelopment Agency. And we'll take a 5-minute recess. I know we've run a little long, but we'll take a 5-minute recess and then begin the council meeting. Thank you.